Welcome to my American history notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history. You may not agree with my conclusions, any of them. Uh, you may even be offended by them, but you at least should know about these events, people, places, concepts, and dates, things that happened. And if you disagree with me in the comments or you get upset about something I've said, that's great for me because that means you're thinking about American history. And that's my goal, is to get you to think about American history and to come to your own conclusions by studying it yourself and not just taking what some political pundit said as being the way it was. Because it's really annoying when people write books and misrepresent the past to either sugarcoat their, or an old racist phrase, whitewash their their favorite person, or to denigrate somebody who's just simply a person who's screwed up and did great things too. So anyway, we're going to discuss. We're talking about Abraham Lincoln and the start of the Civil War. I'm going to say a few things. Like I say, you're going to disagree with a lot of what I say. I'm just talking about my conclusions I've drawn. I'm not a historian. I'm not a great scholar. I'm just a regular person. So here we go. Let me just pull this up here. Now, the day after Fort Sumter fell, Lincoln ordered up 75,000 militia troops to join the regular army to take back the forts and property that had been seized by the Union, not ostensibly at first to force the South to submit and rejoin the Union. In fact, for a long period of time, the North was kind of playing playing easy with slave owners and stuff like that, because Lincoln was hoping for an uprising of Union loyalists in the South, to destroy the rebellion, he called it. But still, that didn't happen. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers rushed to join Lincoln's army with the North and South, both thinking that there would be a quick end to the war, each assuming a military superiority. However, the South lacked the manufacturing facilities required to make them self sufficient in armaments, and the North was able to effectively blockade their ports and limit imports of food and military hardware. In addition, much hope for foreign acknowledgement of the South as a separate nation did not come except for the Pope's letter to Jefferson Davis late in 1863, which, when made public, resulted in a mass desertion of Northern Catholics, according to some sources. Lincoln is also quoted as lamenting the papal interference in the American conflict, which only prolonged the misery, which resulted in 600,000 military deaths, mostly from disease, but many from brutal battles in one of the first truly modern wars, after the Crimean War, the British Crimean War. This war saw submarines, landmines, extensive entrenchments, and observations from balloons, and many other military innovations. It's commonly reported that the North enlisted black soldiers first to fight, but according to staunch pro Lincoln writer General Logan in his book, which I mentioned before, he states that the first black troops were volunteers raised early in May of 1861 to build rebel, a term for the South as Yankees was a term for Northern soldiers, batteries in Memphis, Tennessee, Charleston, South Carolina, Lynchburg, Virginia, and Norfolk, Virginia. Large bodies of free blacks volunteered to do construction work on defensive emplacements even before that. On June 21st of 1861, a law was passed to raise a large number of, quote, colored troops. During a review of rebel troops in New Orleans in late 1861, one regiment of 1,400 supposedly free colored men. Logan goes on to say that vast numbers of free Negroes and slaves were employed to construct rebel fortifications throughout the war. Logan is stunned at the absurdity of black men fighting to maintain an institution that enslaved them. This is a controversial topic. You'll have some historians, usually pro Southern, will talk about black people fighting even for the South. And you have other historians saying that's a myth, it never happened. It's just like, I've read records that there were black slave owners in South Carolina, or mulatto slave owners, and then you have others saying no, that's overplayed. You have historical records that show the free Irish laborers in South Carolina wanted to re-enslave free blacks before the Civil War, and that was negated by white slave owners who were business partners with mulattoes who owned slaves. So it's a lot. It's a complicated. The whole thing is complicated, and it does not allow for simplistic statements. So I just want you to be careful. I was going on by Logan. I want you to know that there were people at the time, which would be called a more primary witness than somebody today, either a leftist or a racist, spouting their point of view. There were people at the time who acknowledged this. Now, you have to understand the lost cause myth, which is generated after the Civil War. You have to read what the leadership of the Confederacy said before the Civil War, and then read what they said after to see the difference. just before, this is going to be about slavery. Afterwards, it was about constitutional government. To justify yourself after the event that you get your rear end kicked in. But the lost cause myth stated that the South could not have won the Civil War because of the lack of manufacturing, because of the lack of manpower, the lack of they weren't self-sufficient. But that's not true. The North had the harder time. The North had to conquer. All South had to do was to fight off an invasion, to stay free. They could have saved the army. Joe Johnston, whose goal was to always save the army and keep moving. He wouldn't protect territory necessarily. He didn't care about cities being taken. And General Grant said in his memoir that if Joe Johnston had been in charge another year, the South would have gotten their independence because the North was done. You get to 1864, the North was like burn out. So the whole lost cause myth, the North had to support to protect supply lines, had to take over territory, had to man forts. They had to do a lot of stuff that all this, to defeat the South. The South just had to stay alive. So you get to things of tactics like, that we call Grant a butcher, but yet why did Robert E. Lee throw bodies at entrenched positions and lose so many people he couldn't afford to lose? So, there's a whole lot of things about that, but let's just remember we're just at the beginning of the Civil War now. And the important point I want to make is that, Lincoln made a gamble. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it would have all turned out like it did anyway. But what happened, the border states had said, we're not seceding unless you try to force the southern deep South states that seceded by force of arms. And when he called the militia, of course, that impelled the states like Virginia and stuff like that to secede. And then, of course, there was always the worry that Kentucky and Maryland and places like that might try to secede. So it's a very complicated subject, and this is where it gets tough because I'm just giving you a survey. I want you to dig and look and come to your own conclusions. I have my own conclusions. I've spouted them here, but you need to. It is a complicated subject, and it's not something that bears just simply a light touch. And certainly, whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're liberal or conservative, it's not really right to just simply color it with your own, what you need to do is dig into it and study it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll continue about the war, just generally, survey type surface stuff, and then lost cause afterwards. All right, thank you.